Linkers Part 1. So first we're going to have a look at linkers and how this plays a big part in reading Part 2. There's lots of categories for linkers. These you can download at the end of this part, but we're going to look at the 5 main areas of linkers. So the first one we're going to have a look at is extra information. These are linkers like furthermore, moreover, in addition, additionally, what is more, besides. Now, when you see one of these linkers, either in the sentence before the gap or after the gap, or in the missing sentences or optional sentences A to G, then you know the sentence that will follow this is extra information to the sentence before. I'll show you an example of this in Linkers Part 2 and how you can use this to your advantage in choosing the right missing sentence. So that's extra information. Other linkers are contrast. So these are linkers like but, however, nevertheless, although, even though, despite. Again, you'll have a list of these to download in Word or PDF at the end of this part. We also have cause, so because, since, due to, etc. Effect, so, therefore, hence, consequently. And again, when you see these linkers, then you know this is an effect of the sentence before. And the last one that comes up a lot is exemplifiers. So for example, for instance, again, a quick example. If you saw the sentence before the gap said lots of people came to the meeting, and then when you look at options A to G, you see, for example, John and Richard, then you can link this as being the missing sentence. So John and Richard, an example of people that came to the meeting. And in Linkers Part 2, which we'll look at now, I'll show you this in more detail. So Linkers Part 2. So when you see a linker in the sentence before or after the gap, as well as in the missing sentence, you'll know that the information in the sentences depend on the linker used. And let's have a look at some example or an example of this. So for example, the sentence after the gap reads, however, she passed the exam with a grade A. Now, pass the exam with a grade A, this is positive. So the sentence before is going to be in contrast to this, so it's most probably going to have a negative meaning. So if we are offered 2 options, A, Susan was on time for the exam, or B, Susan was late for the exam, we'll know that the correct option is B, as the sentence has a negative meaning and is in contrast with passing the exam, which is a positive meaning. Let's just have a look at those 2 examples and put them within context. So if I said Susan was on time for the exam, however, she passed the exam with a grade A, this sentence does not make sense because these are both positive sentences. But if I look at B, Susan was late for the exam, and put it in context, Susan was late for the exam, however, she passed the exam with a grade A, we know this is the correct option because Susan was late for the exam is negative in meaning, she passed the exam is positive in meaning. So when we have linkers from the 5 categories that we've mentioned, if you have a good understanding of linkers, and as I said, there is a grammar section to follow, then you will have a good feeling on which sentence to choose to fit into the right gap.